I got on the set the first day and got dressed. They texted Michael and Leslie and said, "Your dad would have loved this." Having seen the way the Little House fans are, he would have been so incredibly puffed up and proud. He'd be so proud of Michael.
On American television in the 1970s, there was a little girl with 2 braids running freely across the prairie, her bright eyes and innocent smile making millions of viewers believe they were seeing their own childhood reflected back at them. Melissa Gilbert, Laura Ingalls in Little House on the Prairie, was once called America's sweetheart, the embodiment of purity, family, and timeless simple values. But in real life, her story was far from that prairie dream. From the moment she was born, Melissa carried the fracture of abandonment. As she grew, she faced the secret death of her adoptive father, a youth stolen before the camera, marriages undone by infidelity and addiction, and debt so heavy they brought a one-time household name to her knees. The image of Laura remains etched in television history, yet behind it was the real Melissa Gilbert, a woman who struggled her whole life to figure out who she was once the lights went dark. Her story is not only a memoir of a child star who grew up alongside America, but also a journey marked by shadows. Awkward kisses forced at 15 in front of the camera, nights lost in alcohol, painful surgeries to chase Hollywood's beauty standards, and finally, the courage to strip it all away, to return to her silver hair and real wrinkles. It was a brutal journey, but also a brave one, proving that living truthfully is sometimes even harder than being famous. From the very moment she was born, Melissa Gilbert's life was nothing like a fairy tale. On May 8, 1964, in bustling Los Angeles, a newborn baby girl was left behind at the hospital just hours after entering the world. She was taken in by a showbiz couple. Actor and musician Paul Gilbert and dancer Barbara Crane, who adopted her and gave her the name Melissa. From that moment on, she officially stepped into a household that seemed to be lit by the glamour of stage lights, yet carried its own shadows deep inside. Paul Gilbert, the adoptive father Melissa always saw as her greatest anchor, was a comedian and a former pilot who had served in World War II. To Melissa, he was the first true light in her life, a man who brought laughter, comfort, and pride to a little girl desperate for a father's love. But behind the cheerful facade was a man waging silent battles with illness and depression. In 1976, when Melissa was only 11, Paul died suddenly. Adults told her he had suffered a stroke. It wasn't until more than a decade later that she learned the truth. Her father had chosen to end his own life. "My heart broke a second time," Melissa recalled. It wasn't just the pain of losing him, but also the sting of betrayal, of being denied the chance to say goodbye. Her adoptive mother, Barbara, later remarried actor Harold Abeles. The marriage brought no peace, only more tension. From this union, Melissa gained a half-sister, Sarah, later known to the world as Sarah Gilbert, from the sitcom Roseanne. The house Melissa grew up in was always filled with the scent of show business. A mother who had once been a dancer, a father who was an actor, siblings drawn toward the arts. But beneath that sheen of glamour, the home was never a safe haven. The older she grew, the more Melissa realized her childhood was fractured. Half-warm memories of fleeting moments with her father, half loneliness and coldness after his death. That emptiness, however, became the driving force that pushed Melissa to the screen at a very young age. As a child, she often followed her father to film sets, treating the glow of camera lights and the cries of action as something natural. At just 5 years old, she was appearing in commercials, soon landing small roles on television shows. With her radiant face, expressive round eyes, and effortless innocence, she quickly caught the attention of producers. For Melissa, it wasn't just child's play. Acting became her only way to carve out a place for herself in a family full of cracks, in a world that always seemed on the verge of abandoning her. From the outside, her childhood seemed bright, a pretty little girl stepping early into the world of entertainment. But inside, it was the journey of a child endlessly yearning for true protection, for a home that truly felt safe. And perhaps it was this very longing that prepared Melissa Gilbert for the role of a lifetime. Laura Ingalls, the prairie girl blessed with a family overflowing with love, something Melissa herself had never really known. In the emptiness of her childhood, Melissa found another place to cling to: the screen. The glow of the camera lights, the noisy film sets, the props pretending to be real, all quickly became the only safe world where she felt truly seen. By the age of 5, Melissa was already standing in front of the camera in television commercials, her bright eyes and pure smile setting her apart from the thousands of other child faces in Hollywood. But the true turning point came when she was just 9. While hundreds of little girls crowded in to audition for the role of Laura Ingalls in Little House on the Prairie, Melissa walked in simply dressed in overalls, her hair in braids, her face still carrying a trace of dust. Michael Landon, the soul of the entire project, only needed one look at her audition to know. This was Laura. He chose her not for perfect acting technique, but for a natural authenticity, as if Laura had just stepped straight off the page. From that moment on, Melissa's life veered onto a road with no return. For 9 seasons, audiences didn't just watch her play Laura, they inadvertently witnessed Melissa's own real childhood unfolding before their eyes. The laughter, the tears, even the awkwardness of growing up, all were recorded forever on the small screen. Little House was not just a job, but a living diary, where Melissa Gilbert's childhood was captured day after day, year after year. Through it all, Michael Landon became more than a director, producer, or on-screen father Charles Ingalls. He became a spiritual father figure. After the irreplaceable loss of her adoptive father, Melissa found in Michael the guidance, protection, and love she had long yearned for. The Landon household became a second home. Sleepovers, warm family dinners, a close friendship with Leslie Landon, all gave her a sense of family she had never truly known in real life. One memorable incident was the time she forgot her lines during an important scene, something rare for a child actor as professional as she was. Instead of scolding or showing disappointment, Michael called for the entire crew to take a break so Melissa could regain her composure. When they resumed, he looked her straight in the eye and said gently but firmly, "This will never happen again, right?" Those words rang like a wake-up call, helping Melissa realize that acting was not just about talent, but also about responsibility. From then on, she prepared meticulously for every scene, not only to deliver a good performance, but also to show respect for the entire crew. As she later recalled, "Michael taught me that dedication not only helps you succeed, but also shapes the person you become. But every shining light must eventually fade." In 1983, after nearly a decade, NBC abruptly announced the cancellation of Little House on the Prairie. There was no grand farewell party, no proper goodbye to a journey so long and filled with memories. In anger and bitterness, Michael Landon chose a dramatic ending, blowing up the entire set of Walnut Grove in the final episode. For Melissa, that moment felt like a fierce exclamation point, closing off her childhood. A town disappeared from the screen, and with it, the filmed version of her childhood officially came to an end. For Melissa, the explosion that wiped out Walnut Grove was not just the end of a television show. It marked the close of her childhood. Yet before that door shut, Little House on the Prairie had already given her an invaluable legacy. The love of millions of viewers and achievements most children could only dream of. Little House on the Prairie propelled Melissa Gilbert into stardom. Broadcast in more than 100 countries, the series went far beyond the bounds of a family story. It conveyed messages of love, resilience, and moral values. 19th century America was depicted in all its harshness, where the Ingalls family faced poverty, natural disasters, illness, and loss, yet still stood strong in their pursuit of happiness. Their unity, compassion, and endurance became a model of strength and hope, touching audiences across generations. In that success, Melissa's role was irreplaceable. She brought Laura to life with vibrancy and a thirst for living. Thanks to her, Laura was no longer just a character on the page, but a friend, a neighbor's child whom viewers could trust and cherish. Through her performance, Melissa captured hearts not only in America, but around the world. Little House on the Prairie became a childhood memory for millions, passed down through generations as a symbol of family, community, and kindness. In the public eye, Melissa Gilbert was not just a child star, but a cultural figure, an emblem of innocence and decency who appeared at a time when the world was craving human values in an age of change. The show's success also opened the door to wider recognition in the entertainment industry. Melissa received numerous awards and prestigious nominations. In 1980, she was nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for her portrayal of Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker. Proof of her depth as an actress beyond Laura Ingalls. Alongside this, she won the Young Artist Award, securing her place as one of the most talented child actors of her generation. And in 1998, Melissa Gilbert was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a shining symbol of her tireless contributions throughout her career. These honors were not just points of pride, but tangible proof of a journey marked by perseverance, sacrifice, and the fierce dignity of a girl who began life with the fracture of being abandoned at birth. For Melissa Gilbert, Little House on the Prairie was not only a career gateway, but also the place that marked her earliest steps into adulthood, sometimes too soon and full of contradictions. As the on-screen Laura Ingalls grew older, the writers decided to weave in a love story with Almanzo Wilder. That was when Dean Butler appeared, a 23-year-old cast as Melissa's future husband, while she was only 15. The age gap startled many, even worried some. But Hollywood, in the 1970s and 80s, was far less sensitive than today, and Melissa was forced into an experience for which she was nowhere near ready. The climax came in the episode Sweet 16, where Melissa had to perform her very first kiss on camera. It was also the first kiss of her real life, and it unfolded under the eyes of hundreds: the director, her co-star, and the entire crew. Behind the camera, her mother wept, heartbroken to see her little girl pushed into a moment of adulthood too early. Melissa even begged the director to change the kiss to a hug, but the script had to be followed. So she did her job, awkwardly giving the kiss under the weight of embarrassment and pressure. Audiences were split. Some swooned over the romantic storyline between Laura and Almanzo, calling it one of the show's most beautiful moments. Others, especially in the press, questioned the age gap and whether it was appropriate to have a minor perform a romantic scene with an adult man. At the time, Melissa had no voice to object. Only decades later did she admit the truth. There was never any real romance between her and Dean Butler. It was all acting. Dean was more like an older brother, always professional, always protective, shielding her from uncomfortable situations. The sweetness on screen was nothing more than an illusion crafted by the script and the camera, yet powerful enough to convince millions of viewers. It was love. That very illusion turned the Laura Almanzo story into one of television's most beautiful misunderstandings, proof of acting's power, but also a silent burden Melissa Gilbert carried from her teenage years. Melissa's career after Little House opened up with countless opportunities, but also with plenty of traps. In 1979, she stunned audiences by portraying Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker. The role demanded both physical intensity and raw emotion, a girl both deaf and blind, screaming, thrashing, and struggling to connect with the world. At just 15, Melissa made viewers forget the little Laura they once knew. The performance not only earned her a Primetime Emmy nomination, but also proved that her talent could transcend a single iconic character. Just a year later, she challenged herself again in The Diary of Anne Frank, 1980, retelling the tragedy of a young Jewish girl in the shadows of war. This time, she was no longer the innocent Prairie child, but a fragile, mature Anne Frank, confronting the nearness of death. Audiences were astonished by her transformation, and Melissa began to carve her place among America's most promising young television actresses. But success did not mean freedom. The media and the public still viewed her through a fixed lens. America's little girl with braids and prairie dresses. Every mature role she attempted was scrutinized under the shadow of Laura Ingalls. Melissa knew she had to take bigger risks. From the late 1970s through the following 3 decades, she appeared in more than 40 television series and TV movies, an enormous body of work few of her peers could match. She chose hard-hitting scripts, Choices of the Heart, about the death of a nun in El Salvador, Shattered Trust, portraying a sexual abuse survivor, The Carrie Buck Story, exposing the history of forced sterilization in America. These were no longer the safe, sweet roles audiences expected, but a Melissa who had grown up, daring to confront society's darkest truths. Even when she ventured onto the Broadway stage or lent her voice to Barbara Gordon in Batman, the animated series, 1992 to 1995, Melissa showed the same persistence. She refused to be labeled yet again. The child star of yesterday now had to learn how to become her own woman, not only to be recognized in her craft, but also to escape the long-clinging label of America's childhood heroine. Big or small successes, leading or supporting roles, doors opening and closing, all of it shaped a journey of self-definition, where Melissa Gilbert constantly fought to be seen not as Laura Ingalls, but as a true actress in her own right, with her own pain, strength, and bold choices. Melissa's career after Little House opened up with countless opportunities, but also with hidden pitfalls. In 1979, she shocked audiences by portraying Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker. The role demanded both physical and emotional intensity. A young girl, deaf and blind, screaming, thrashing and struggling to connect with the world. At just 15, Melissa made audiences forget the little Laura they once knew. The performance not only earned her a Primetime Emmy nomination, but also proved that her talent could break free from a single iconic character. Just a year later, she pushed herself further with The Diary of Anne Frank, 1980, reliving the tragedy of a young Jewish girl in the darkness of war. This time, she was no longer the innocent Prairie child, but a fragile, mature Anne Frank, staring death in the face. Viewers were astonished by her transformation, and Melissa began carving her name among the ranks of America's most capable young television actresses. But success did not mean freedom. The media and the public still fixed her in their minds as America's little girl with braids and prairie dresses. Every adult role she attempted was measured against the shadow of Laura Ingalls. Melissa knew she had to take greater risks. From the late 1970s through the next 3 decades, she appeared in more than 40 television series and TV movies, an immense body of work few of her peers could match. She chose bold, challenging scripts, Choices of the Heart, about the murder of a nun in El Salvador, Shattered Trust, portraying a survivor of sexual abuse, The Carrie Buck Story, exposing the history of forced sterilization in America. These roles were no longer the safe, sweet characters audiences expected, but a grown Melissa, unafraid to confront society's darkest corners. Even when she ventured onto the Broadway stage or voiced Barbara Gordon in Batman, the animated series, 1992 to 1995, Melissa proved her persistence. She refused to be labeled all over again. The child star of yesterday now had to learn how to become her own woman, not only to be recognized as an actress, but also to finally free herself from the clinging label of America's childhood heroine. After breaking free from the oversized shadow of America's little girl, Melissa Gilbert did not choose the easy path of settling into her ready-made fame. She wanted to prove that she was not just Laura Ingalls on screen, but a grown woman with a voice and with the power to create change. That ambition led her away from acting and onto a different stage, one lit not by Hollywood spotlights, but by the arenas of politics and labor unions. From 2001 to 2005, she served as president of the Screen Actors Guild, SAG, becoming only the 3rd woman in history to hold that powerful position. At the same time, she also served as vice president of the AFL-CIO, the largest labor federation in the United States. During her tenure, Gilbert focused on reforming insurance and pension systems, while paying special attention to the rights of child actors, children like she once was, forced to grow up too soon under the glare of the camera. She also took a strong stand against film studios outsourcing production overseas to cut costs, which left thousands of American workers jobless. For her, this was not just dry administrative work, but a battle she chose to fight, fueled by her own experiences in the unforgiving world of show business. But her drive to bring social change did not stop there. On August 10th, 2015, exactly 2 years after moving with her husband Timothy Busfield to Michigan, Melissa Gilbert officially announced her candidacy for the U.S. House of Representatives, running in Michigan's 8th congressional district. She became the Democratic Party's face in a region long dominated by Republicans. During the campaign, she openly voiced support for Planned Parenthood and reproductive rights, a deeply personal stance, as both she and her brother had been adopted. Her candor drew significant support, but also fierce attacks from opponents. Her unpaid tax debts, nearly $500,000, were relentlessly exploited, becoming a heavy burden in the race. By May 2016, Gilbert was forced to withdraw for health reasons. Spinal injuries and complications from past accidents led doctors to advise that she could not withstand the demands of a high-intensity campaign. Even after leaving politics, Melissa Gilbert never abandoned her social activism. She has remained active in literacy initiatives, diversity and equality campaigns in film, and continued to advocate for the rights of actors. For her, fighting for a more humane art form is also a way of restoring to the profession the decency that her own childhood had once been deprived of. After stepping out of the glow of Laura Ingalls, Melissa Gilbert found herself trapped in another cage, one called Hollywood standards. From the innocent Prairie girl with braided pigtails, she was forced to transform into a grown-up, glamorous star molded to fit public expectations. Before she could even fully understand what youth meant, Melissa was already on the operating table. At 18, she had her nose altered. Not long after, implants were placed in her body, a stark reminder that in Hollywood, natural beauty was never enough. Through the 2000s and 2010s, the pressure only grew heavier. Botox, fillers, hair dye, all became survival treatments to preserve the illusion of her 20s. But instead of feeling young, Melissa no longer recognized the face in the mirror. She bitterly described herself as a cartoon face, frozen, artificial, devoid of expression. By 2015, after years of running from age, she decided to say enough. Melissa removed her implants, stopped all cosmetic procedures, and let her silver hair grow freely. In a statement that resonated with countless women, she declared, "Aging is a privilege." There's no such thing as anti-aging. It was not only an act of self-liberation, but a manifesto against the merciless standards Hollywood imposed on women. But if appearance was just a mask, the true wounds lay deeper within. Melissa had turned to alcohol as a teenager, and in adulthood, it spiraled into addiction. 2 bottles of wine each night became her survival ritual, accompanied by cocaine to numb the loneliness. At its worst, during a house party while guests were still chatting in the living room, Melissa collapsed unconscious in the dog bed. That scene, coupled with the pained eyes of her son begging her to stop, became a brutal wake-up call. The very next day, she went to Alcoholics Anonymous, beginning the grueling journey of recovery, not to return to the spotlight, but to save her own life. Her body, however, carried the scars of every battle. Melissa's spine repeatedly cried out for relief. In 2010, she underwent major surgery for a herniated disc. In 2012, while competing on Dancing with the Stars, she fell and struck her head live on television, suffering a concussion that sent her to the hospital. Before she could heal, a collapsing balcony struck her, worsening the injuries. In 2020, she once again returned to the operating table. The surgical scars etched across her back are silent evidence of suffering few ever knew. And even in 2023, when it seemed the storms had passed, she was struck by cellulitis, a severe skin infection caused by nothing more than an insect bite. A reminder that her already fragile body remained on the edge of vulnerability. The crises were not only physical. When marriages unraveled and her career slowed, Melissa was hit by a financial shock. Between 2011 and 2013, tax authorities discovered she owed nearly $500,000, a staggering burden for anyone. She did not deny it, nor did she try to evade. Melissa admitted her mistakes openly and created a plan to pay it off. Slowly, piece by piece, each payment became a promise. She would no longer run from her past. Perhaps from the outside, this journey looks like a string of failures and losses. But for Melissa Gilbert, it was the road to learning how to stand again, how to live bravely with her real face, her natural hair, and the scars that could never be erased. Because, in the end, she understood. True freedom does not come from clinging to youth, but from accepting oneself after everything has been broken. After years of struggling with the harshness of Hollywood, where she was forced to grow up too quickly, to be prettier, to become a model version of herself she no longer recognized, Melissa Gilbert entered her 20s with a soul full of emptiness. The pain of losing her father, the pressures of fame, the self-destruction through alcohol, and the surgeries to alter her appearance only deepened her hunger for a love strong enough to soothe it all. And that was when Rob Lowe appeared. In 1981, when both were rising stars in Hollywood, they met and were almost instantly drawn to each other. Melissa later admitted in her memoir that she loved Rob from the very first moment, foolishly and desperately, a love that was not just young infatuation, but a desperate attempt to fill the void left by a fractured family. Their romance quickly became a media sensation. Rob Lowe, with his striking good looks, was being hailed as one of the heartthrobs of the 1980s. Melissa, still remembered by audiences as Laura Ingalls, revealed an entirely different side. A young woman who dared to love and to give herself completely. They appeared everywhere together, from red carpets to private vacations. Fans saw them as Hollywood's golden couple. By 1986, they were engaged, seemingly just a step away from a dream wedding. But beneath the glamorous surface were cracks neither of them was mature enough to handle. Fame brought temptations, endless parties, hectic careers, and shadows of betrayal. Melissa later revealed that Rob cheated on her more than once, while she herself, lost in loneliness, strayed at times. The greatest tragedy struck when Melissa became pregnant. In her memoir, she recalled the moment she told Rob and received hesitation in return. He wasn't ready to be a father, wasn't ready to give up his reckless youth. Not long after that painful conversation, Melissa miscarried. The loss cut the last thread holding them together. In 1987, they broke up. More than 3 decades later, looking back, Melissa said she understood. Rob was just a young man in his 20s, far too immature to shoulder the weight of a family. But for the young Melissa of that time, the shock was the collapse of her entire world. It wasn't just a first love lost, but a lifelong scar, a reminder of youthful mistakes, and at the same time, a wound that helped forge the resilience she would need to stand again. After parting ways with Rob Lowe, carrying a broken heart and the irreparable pain of miscarriage, Melissa Gilbert entered one of the most uncertain chapters of her life. She was still so young, grieving, yet forced to stand tall under the weight of fame that allowed her no room to collapse. And it was in 1988, at this fragile moment, that she met Beau Brinkman, a lesser-known actor and friend of Dennis and Randy Quaid. The romance unfolded almost instinctively. Just weeks into dating, Melissa and Beau decided to marry. The wedding was rushed, a desperate attempt to fill the gaping void left by her failed relationship with Rob Lowe. But it was this very haste that sowed the seeds of instability to come. In 1989, Melissa gave birth to her first son, Dakota Paul Brinkman. Becoming a mother gave her new joy and meaning in life. Dakota was her light, proof of her hope that she could build a family stronger than the fractured one she had known as a child. Yet inside their small home, cracks began to show all too quickly. Bo Brinkman, with a career lacking recognition and without the glamour to mask his flaws, slipped into a pattern of partying, drinking, and endless nights out, leaving Melissa to shoulder the family alone. Many nights, she sat by her baby's crib, listening to the ticking clock, while Bo vanished without a word. When he returned, he often carried the smell of alcohol and a cold detachment, as though the home no longer belonged to him. Secret phone calls, half-hidden messages, the evasive look in his eyes when Melissa confronted him. All of it slowly carved deeper wounds into her already fragile heart. Rumors spread that Bo was involved with other women, including Shannon Dougherty, the younger friend Melissa had once considered family. For Melissa, it was not only a blow from her husband, but a double wound, the betrayal of a partner and the fracture of a cherished friendship. Whether the rumors were true or not, their mere existence was enough to leave her sleepless, consumed by the gnawing sense of betrayal from both sides. Beyond alleged affairs, Bo inflicted a quieter, less visible violence upon their marriage: emotional abuse. It came in the form of cold indifference, cutting words like knives, and a controlling demeanor that left Melissa feeling stifled and suffocated. In her memoir, she admitted living in a spiral of suspicion and humiliation, each day like walking on thin ice, never knowing when it might crack beneath her. Melissa described the marriage as a cycle of disappointment and bitterness, making her feel as though she were reliving the family tragedy that haunted her childhood, where adoptive parents had split and love always ended in loss. On nights when she cradled her son in her arms, she felt both comforted and profoundly alone within her marriage. In 1994, after 6 years of struggling to hold on, the marriage ended in divorce. Dakota remained with his mother, while Melissa walked away carrying more emotional scars than relief. She once said, "I thought I had found safety, but it turned out to be just another illusion." And from that moment, Melissa was forced to face a painful truth. Not every love can heal. Sometimes it leaves wounds deeper than anything endured before. After breaking free from the bitter marriage with Bo Brinkman, Melissa Gilbert thought she would close her heart and heal on her own. But the human heart is often weaker than reason, and once again, she sought comfort in love. In 1992, fate brought her to Bruce Boxleitner, a familiar face on American television, 12 years her senior, divorced, and already a father of 2. They met through a mutual friend, and at first it was nothing more than casual conversations. But gradually, Bruce's maturity and calm demeanor became an anchor, convincing Melissa that this might finally be the safe harbor she had always longed for. Yet the relationship was never smooth from the start. Bruce postponed their wedding multiple times, hesitating to commit long-term, leaving Melissa with feelings of insecurity and abandonment. In her memoir, she wrote that there were moments she nearly let go, but love, along with her hope of building a complete family, kept her patient. At last, in 1995, they married, beginning a union that would last 16 years, the longest marriage of Melissa's life. Together they had a son, Michael Garrett Boxleitner, born in 1995 and named after Michael Landon, the spiritual father figure who had guided Melissa both on screen and in life. Becoming a mother once again filled her with joy, but life in a blended family with Bruce's children from his previous marriage, was not easy. Melissa found herself juggling the roles of mother, wife, and mediator, trying to hold together complicated family dynamics, all while her career continued to make demands on her. In her memoir, Prairie, Melissa recalled that Bruce often immersed himself in work, rarely shared his feelings, and at times seemed so distant that she felt she was fighting alone. That lack of connection, combined with life's pressures, pushed her into moments of weakness. The breaking point came when Melissa became entangled in an emotional affair that never turned physical. Yet the damage was devastating. One day, recordings of her private conversations mysteriously appeared in their mailbox. Bruce listened to them all. Melissa collapsed in tears, begging for forgiveness, but the fragile trust in their marriage was slashed apart. They tried to repair what was broken, attending marriage counseling, attempting to rebuild the bridge. Melissa admitted that Bruce never shouted or became violent, but his cold silence after the betrayal was harsher than any accusation. It left her living in perpetual guilt, as though she were forever indebted, forever seeking redemption. And even though they stayed together for many more years, the ghost of that recording never disappeared. It lingered in every silence, in every seemingly trivial argument, until eventually it became the abyss that swallowed their marriage whole. In 2011, after years of trying to hold on, Melissa and Bruce officially divorced. For her, the separation was not only sorrowful, but exhausting. After 2 failed marriages, she wrote that she had lost faith that love could bring permanence. Once again, she was left to face the hollow void of loneliness, a void that neither fame nor Hollywood's bright lights could ever fill. After walking away from her 16-year marriage to Bruce Boxleitner, Melissa Gilbert fell into a void that seemed impossible to fill. She was exhausted, stripped of faith in love, and nearly resigned to the idea that her life would always be spent piecing together fragments. But life has a way of turning unexpectedly. In 2013, at the age of 48, Melissa met Timothy Busfield, an actor, director, and man who had also weathered 2 failed marriages. They didn't meet under the dazzling lights of Hollywood, but in a small bar where they happened to sit at the same table and discovered a quiet kinship that needed no display. Timothy was 55 then, a father of 3, carrying his own share of scars that made him understand the fragility of love. They came together not with youthful impulsiveness or dreamy illusions, but with the clear-eyed awareness of people who had endured heartbreak. Melissa later recalled that from their very first conversations, she felt an extraordinary calm in Timothy, the kind of peace she had longed for her entire life. Just a few months later, they decided to marry in a small ceremony in Santa Barbara. Melissa wore a simple yet bold red dress, as if to declare that this time she was marrying not to please anyone else, but to choose happiness for herself. After the wedding, they left Hollywood behind and moved to a 14-acre farm in the Catskills, New York. Melissa let go of high heels, heavy makeup, and lavish parties. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves to plant vegetables, raise chickens, and tend flower beds. Together, she and Timothy turned an old wooden house into a true home. They painted walls, fixed the roof, laughed when rain leaked onto the floor, and celebrated when the wood stove first spread its warmth. At times, life was hard, but for Melissa, it was the simple happiness she had spent her whole life chasing. More importantly, Timothy was not just a husband, but a true partner. He didn't try to control or judge her, but encouraged her to be herself. A woman who had endured heartbreak yet still deserved joy and freedom. In his eyes, her wrinkles and silver hair were not signs of age, but proof of a resilient journey. Since 2022, Melissa has launched a new project called Modern Prairie, a brand and community for women over 50. It reflects the life philosophy she embraced after meeting Timothy, honoring age, living authentically, refusing to chase false standards. Together with her husband, she has taken part in community projects, written books, and shared her life story to inspire others. Melissa once said, "I went through marriages because I was afraid of being alone, because I longed to be loved. But with Timothy, I'm here because I want to be, not because I need to be." That single sentence captures the long journey of pain and resilience, and of a woman who, at last, found a place where her heart could finally rest. After all the heartbreaks and rebirths, Melissa Gilbert finally found a missing piece of her life, the truth of her origins. After decades of growing up in an adoptive family filled with stage lights but also emptiness, she decided to search for her biological father. And in one fateful phone call, before she could even explain, he simply said, "You're Laura, aren't you?" I already knew he had watched her on television for years, in the role of Laura Ingalls, recognizing familiar features in the face of that young girl. The reunion with her biological siblings left Melissa overwhelmed. For the first time in her life, she saw herself reflected in the eyes, smiles, and gestures of blood relatives. For so long, she had lived with a sense of not belonging anywhere. But in that moment, the emptiness inside her was filled with something simple yet profound: true family. That joy, however, was tinged with sorrow, as her biological mother, Kathy, had passed away before they could meet. On her personal page, Melissa once wrote that her mother had shown the courage to let me go, a painful decision, but one born of love, so her daughter might have another chance at life. Now, in a small wooden house on a 14-acre farm in the Catskills, Melissa and Timothy Busfield continue to write a quiet chapter of their lives. They raise chickens, grow vegetables, and live close to nature, sometimes choosing days without Wi-Fi to embrace absolute silence. From a woman once consumed by glamour, pressure, and destructive habits, Melissa has rediscovered herself in the soil, in the warmth of the kitchen, in the smile of the man beside her. In 2022, she launched Modern Prairie, a community and brand for women over 50, a space to share, inspire, and celebrate the true value of aging. Melissa no longer struggles to cling to youth. Instead, she chooses to live fully with each wrinkle, treating them as proud milestones. And in 2024, as the world celebrated the 50th anniversary of Little House on the Prairie, Melissa returned alongside Dean Butler before an audience of 18,000. They were no longer the on-screen lovers who sparked generations of mistaken belief, but two friends, two colleagues bound by the shared memories of millions. Their appearance not only rekindled nostalgia, but also proved something simple. Melissa Gilbert, after everything, is still the Laura she once was, carrying with her love, pain, and the strength to overcome every upheaval, to live a life truly her own. The year 2025 opened like a new chapter full of hope and clarity for Melissa Gilbert. After years of carefully choosing projects and nurturing her own brand, she returned to the stage in the off-Broadway play Still by playwright Leah Romeo, a two-person drama in which she played Helen, a single woman reuniting with an old love after 30 years, only to discover how deeply political views and personal values can divide even the most profound feelings. Still premiered at the Sheen Center in February, and Melissa said the role gave her a sense of completeness, a reminder that love is not reserved only for the young, but also for those rich with experience. Alongside theater, she also reappeared on television with a guest role in Hallmark's When Calls the Heart, playing Georgie McGill. For Melissa, working with Michael Landon Jr., the son of Michael Landon, her spiritual father figure from Little House, felt like coming home. At times, she felt that the audience's gaze on her performance was itself a kind of homecoming. Beyond acting, Melissa continued to lead Modern Prairie, the lifestyle brand she co-founded, now a platform where she pours her ideas on aging, self-acceptance, and building community among women over 50. She actively shares content about the changes of body and spirit with age, the transition from being a mother to becoming a grandmother, about living more slowly, more simply, sometimes even without Wi-Fi, to rediscover peace. One of the most notable moments of her year came when Netflix announced a remake of Little House on the Prairie. Though she had no role in producing or starring in the new project, Melissa voiced her support, emphasizing that there is room for new stories within the Little House universe, even when told from a different perspective. She rejected criticism that a remake would wokeify the series, pointing out that the original show had already addressed social issues such as racism, addiction, and gender with deep respect. She also devoted more time to her family, living in New York with her husband, staying close to her children and grandchildren. Every role now weighed carefully to fit her life schedule, so that each day she could come home, see her grandchildren's smiles, hear stories from the garden, or sit down to a family meal. After more than half a century under the public eye, Melissa Gilbert leaves behind a legacy that extends far beyond the frames of television. From the little girl Laura Ingalls running freely through the fields of Little House on the Prairie, she became a symbol of a simpler America. One that cherished family, resilience, and kindness. That role traveled far beyond U.S. borders, embedding itself in the childhood memories of millions around the world, forever tying Melissa's name to the image of the Prairie Girl. Yet Melissa's legacy is not confined to the screen. By openly sharing her private struggles, from losing her father, enduring failed marriages, and battling alcoholism, to her cosmetic surgeries and health crises, she transformed herself into a voice of courage. She proved that a star can admit weakness, can confront mistakes with honesty, and that this very vulnerability is what allows audiences to truly connect and see themselves reflected. As president of the Screen Actors Guild from 2001 to 2005, she also helped shape how Hollywood protects its performers, improving insurance, pensions, and safeguarding the rights of child actors. That was the mark of an artist who lived not only for herself, but also fought for those who would follow. And entering her 60s, Melissa opened yet another chapter with Modern Prairie, a community where middle-aged women could rediscover confidence and reclaim their voice. Her message, aging is a privilege. There's no such thing as anti-aging, became a manifesto embraced by thousands of women as a compass for living fully and authentically. More than just a child star, an actress, or an activist, Melissa Gilbert stands as proof that a life full of wounds can still shine brightly. Her greatest legacy is the lesson of resilience. You may stumble, you may lose your way, But if you have the courage to be honest with yourself, you will find a path forward, one more genuine and powerful than any fame could ever offer. Melissa Gilbert's life is not a fairy tale of unbroken happiness, nor a tragedy of despair. It is a long, winding journey, where a girl seemingly born to play others finally learned how to live as herself. From the spotlight of film sets to the private shadows, from unseen losses to quiet happiness on a small farm, she turned everything into material for a life, imperfect, but true. And perhaps it is that very truth that makes her mark endure. And you, when you look at Melissa Gilbert's journey of pain and pride, what do you see reflected in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so we can continue exploring more real, deeply human stories together.